Harriet Tubman had crossed the line into enemy territory 19 times. As a conductor of the Underground Railroad, I can say what most conductors can't, she grinned. I never ran my train off the track, and I never lost a passenger. I've got up here a statement. Harriet was single-minded about her work as a conductor on the Underground Railroad. What do you think about the fact that she broke the law, that she stole, lied, drugged crying babies, and threatened fearful runaways with a gun in their back to move on? And then at a time that you decide, that you feel you and your partner have talked about this, then I'd like you to turn to the people across from you and begin to talk in a foursome. Begin to share some of the ideas that you talked about as partnerships and begin to talk to each other about what kind of ideas they had.
Now Lincoln is president. Then it won't be breaking the law once he bans slavery. Yeah, but he doesn't do that until what, 4 years later.
I think she wasn't going to kill him or anything, and I think she knew what she was doing.
Yeah, I agree.
But she broke the law for a good cause, because it shouldn't be right to have one person own another person.
I think so too. And she did everything for a good cause, really.
Yeah.
What did you think about that chapter?
I enjoyed the chapter. Actually, I've enjoyed the whole book, because I like learning about history and stuff like that without having to read it out of a social studies book.
I mean, breaking the law, first of all, was just going against your slave owners.
She was helping us get to where we are by breaking a small law was trying to break a big law.
Are y'all finished yet? I guess. I think that she did the right thing.
By breaking the law?
Yeah, I think so too. I would have done that if I was brave enough. I mean, well, it was wrong to hold them as slaves.
It's kind of weird how first there was the Civil War. It was like a century before all the Civil Rights Movement. And you're right, blacks really weren't free until the Civil Rights Movement. And still this day there's racism, and probably centuries beyond there will.
Yeah. There's any way of really stopping racism.
Because some people are just not in the heart of that they really hate black people.
I think there is a way. Racism all over. I mean, people hate Germans, and they hate Chinese, and they hate Asians, and people hate white and black.
It's not just white against black, and it's not black against white. It's all around, it's different cultures against different cultures.
I was watching a movie I don't know if it was this weekend with the spring break anyway, about the Holocaust. Do you all know about World War II and about the Hitler in Germany, and they took so many Jewish people and put them in prisons? Just a little bit about that?
I saw some kind of movie like that about a lady whose father and sister got taken during World War
II.
This kind of reminds me of the Ten Commandments last night too.
Okay.
Oh man! Because the people were following Moses to freedom, the slaves in Egypt were following Moses to freedom.
That's why they started calling Harriet Moses.
And some of the people didn't believe, didn't have faith to go on, and some of the people that she was going to threaten with the gun didn't have faith to go on either.
Well, that goes with the movie I saw. Okay, I want you to step back to January, and we read My Brother Sam is Dead. And the main character in that was not Sam. Yeah, it was Tim. Tim Meeker. I want you to do a very quick Venn diagram comparing Tim and Harriet.
They both matured in a different way. They matured. See, Tim matured when he had to take the wagon back, and it was scary. And so did and
Having to escape for the first time.
Yeah, she matured that way. So they were both scary. They both matured scarily, or something like that.
Well, I think that
that Tim, he had 2 people in his family die, and Harriet says none of her slaves have ever died, and she'd be more careful. But Tim
She's
has,
more like responsible.
yeah, and Tim has had somebody in his family died and had that experience.
She's not more responsible, it's just that she's made more people escape. And
She's had more responsibility to do than Tim. Tim hasn't had a lot of responsibility.
yeah.
He couldn't help his father when he was on that ship.
I mean, yeah, and Tim didn't get beat with a whip or nothing. But Harriet, whenever, like at
Tim
the
was
very
kind of
beginning,
safer than Harriet was.
Kind of stayed to himself. Yeah. Harriet was very bold.
Yeah, Tim didn't share his feelings very much.
Right.
As much
I
as
mean, he got into the Minutemen up in Massachusetts, didn't he?
Yeah.
I think he got into Boston too, didn't he?
But neither one of them were in wars.
But they was in, well,
They were, see, Tim's older brother was, and then Harriet was almost. I mean, it was real close to it.
Oh.
And that was one of the causes.
Harriet is brave. Put that down. Everybody knows that.
But they were both brave.
that was Tim brave.
He went to see Sam and all that, and he shook up for
Yeah.
him.
Yeah.
He went.
Tim could have went off and tried to do something, just like he could have went off just like his brother did to try to.
he's always out to
I know, but they could fight in the war. That's not the point.
Okay.
But look, just tell us what you were going to say.
And Harriet, and they both gave up something. Like, Tim had to give up his father and his brother to this war, and then Harriet had to give up her parents to do what she believed in. They both.
Because
Tim was confused about
they weren't
the war.
free.
Harriet knew exactly
Yeah,
what the
Harriet knew
war
what
was
side
about.
exactly what side she was on, and Tim didn't know.
They both had to deal with death all through it.
We already got that. What do we have? We have brave, courageous, heroic, had to deal with death, worker,
Not able to make their own decisions.
not able to make their own decisions, independent, born in the land of the free, had secrets.
But somehow, even 50 years later, I kept thinking that there might have been another way besides war to achieve the same end. All right. I read that last part because I wanted to remind you of Tim's epilogue, and about at the very end when he says, you know, was it all worth it after all those years? You're going to go back to partner work. One of you will be Harriet Tubman, and one of you will be Tim Meeker. And you're going to write a dialogue as if Harriet was talking to Tim as he wrote this epilogue.
If it takes the war to free the slaves, I would be willing to fight myself. My dream is to free the people.
I understand your reason, but still, why not try to talk about it? Or have you already tried that? But I had a family member in the war. What about that situation?
Talk. I would if I could, but white people just won't listen. I'm sorry, but you people are so pig-headed. Well, not all of you, only slave owners. I have not tried it, but I couldn't if I wanted to.
I think that there are more civilized ways to solve the problem. What do you think?
Well, I think that war may never be necessary, and slavery ain't right either. You got a point. What do you think about slavery?
I think that slavery is very, very wrong. The only reason why it doesn't say that in the Bible is because God thought the people would have enough common sense and know it's wrong.
War hurts. I know it does, but sometimes it is needed. Everyone is free now because of a war. I was sorry for all the casualties of the Civil War, too. It had to come sometime.
How come it had to come sometime?
Some people's minds were set on fighting, and they would get what they wanted no matter what. Only they could stop themselves.
War didn't have to come exactly at that time. I know it's not coincidence. War could have waited out at least mine, my brother's, and my father's life.
Okay, we'll spend some time after lunch to share some more of these dialogues with the class, but I'd like to do some wrap-up. I know there was some discussion during the work time about, you know, has the Civil War started, and, you know, is it important to include that?
Even though that they did have laws, they was always fighting against the laws. And they never really wanted them, or one side did and one side didn't. So to me, they was still fighting, even though they had not fired the first hit.
Like slave and master, sort of. I mean, the slaves always wanted to be free, or most of them did. Even though they sometimes didn't show it, they usually wanted to. So I think that that was sort of like a war going on between the two people. Or
It's like the master would always win because all he had to do was get a whip, and he would start hitting them with a whip or something, and the slave, only thing the slave would be able to do to win was just run away. And that was the same way with Tim. Like, he couldn't change the people's mind of killing his brother because, I mean, they had their mind set, and he was like the colonel, and he said no, he's gonna be killed. I mean, because they want to set an example of it.
well, with the slaves and stuff, I think that even before even guns were even involved in it, that they were still fighting because a lot of times words can hurt more than a gunshot or something. Because they were fighting with words a long time before the war.
Kind of like a Cold War.
Say that again?
A Cold War.
What do you mean?
I mean, fight, you know, talking. You're really having a war, but you're talking like if you and somebody else was in like a debate or something like that, and you still be fighting the war, you still be going against each other, but you just talking, not fighting, not using guns or materials.
So like Jessica said, the words.
I mean, the war didn't have to come. It could have been solved another way. I mean, these kind of problems could have been talked about, and in the future. And if you look back on these wars, maybe in the future when there's a problem like this, you don't have to have war. You can talk it out besides losing people.
What to be said about the Civil War, and they didn't need to have a war, but to some point, I do think they did, because on the point of the slaves, because they had gone on for so long, and they had tried to get it out, but it just seemed like they wouldn't. I mean, they kept on pushing, and something had to give. So to that point, I do think there was a war needed.
But no one really gained anything out of the war. There may not be slavery now because they had a war, but Jennifer, if you really look at it, it could have been solved in another way besides war. Look at how many people were lost in every war. I mean, every time you have war, you turn somebody else into a loser. Maybe that person had good ideas. They really weren't a loser. They were just showing their thoughts. And another person thought that they were better just because they were more violent than the other person. That's what war brings out.
We have to go to lunch, guys. I'm sorry.